Well, welcome to another episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. I'm the host, Nathan Battershall, and I'm really privileged today to have Will Sullivan, the CEO of PropCode, with us. It's good to have you in, Will.
Thanks, Nathan. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Well, look, I always like to start off maybe just getting a little bit of a background about yourself. I guess what got you into starting PropCode, and tell us a little bit about PropCode as well.
Yeah, great. So I've been working on PropCode now for about 3 years, close to 3 years. It's part of a journey through my career where I've done quite a lot of different things, really brought some technical expertise where I can and data and technology perspectives and knowledge. And urban planning is something I've gotten into starting about 8 years ago. And I find it just super interesting, you know, how cities grow, how cities plan for growth, how the property development process works, and how the rules for planning, you know, control that and shape how a city grows. And I found opportunities through consulting to advise governments on policies for planning. But what really struck me as an opportunity was bringing technology into the planning rules themselves. And that's just such a manual part of anyone's process.
Yes.
Whether it's the owner of a site or a developer or an architect, even the town planners, they're the experts, but it's just human, you know, work, right? It's all manual.
Yep.
And then the council's, of course, assessing projects. So the vision for PropCode is that we'll bring software and technology into the system to help all those people just dial into software to get the answers about what the planning rules say.
Yeah.
And really cut out a lot of that headache and a lot of that confusion about what can I do with the site, or is that allowed, or can we approve this application?
Yep. Excellent. And look, I've dabbled a little bit in the software too, and I must admit it's terrific.
Thanks.
The reports and the information it can break down. And you're so right. Like, I think the elements of going through a state of environmental planning policy or a local LEP or a DCP has been so tiresome for a lot of years. And even myself with a background in planning and design and architectural, it can be quite tiring. So the fact that you've created this software to be able to really dig down into a particular site is terrific. Have you, I guess, can you just walk us through what areas, what states that operates in? Is it for DA or is it for CDC or is it for both?
Yeah, sure. So what sort of projects can you do on PropCode? So we cover New South Wales right now with our software. That's because of my knowledge of the New South Wales planning system.
Yep.
You can imagine anytime we're bringing technology into it, or of course more recently it's AI, and everyone's talking about AI and trying to use AI and everything.
Yeah.
And we do at PropCode.
Yes.
But you've got to be really careful that you're checking what the software says.
Yes.
Of course, as we build it, or as we kind of plan out how to build it, it's really great to have that knowledge in our team about the planning system and how the planning rules work and what actually is the correct answer.
Yep.
Then we can build the software to be sure that it's giving that correct answer. So New South Wales is where we operate, and we will expand to get to the rest of the country.
Yep.
So if you're not in New South Wales, we'll get to you soon.
Yes.
That will require us partnering with local experts in the planning rules in those other states.
Yep.
So here in New South Wales, we cover both DA and CDC pathways.
Yep.
So you can get a separate analysis for either direction there.
Yep.
If you are not familiar, DA is the normal path for most projects. You apply to council, and council says yes or no according to their LEP and DCP.
Yep.
CDC is the statewide codes. It's a fast track process where a certifier can approve it. Because it's not local, the rules are a bit easier to grasp potentially in some ways, but then harder in other ways because there's a lot of qualifications to go down the CDC path.
Yep.
So we've built separate tools to cover both of those.
Yep.
And the DA one, we have to gradually expand to cover LEPs and DCPs.
Yep.
So it's most of Sydney right now, and then a handful of others like Central Coast, like Macquarie, Wollongong, and that will be gradually expanding over time.
Yep. So the plan is to start to move that into most councils across New South Wales.
Yeah, that's right. Again, it's about checking, does the AI, that actually is an AI based tool.
Yes.
We built, as you can imagine, a lot of complex technology around the AI to make sure it's answering correctly and pulling out the right rules and interpreting. And so it takes a bit more time to get that correct and roll it out to each of the councils. So of course we don't want to put out a bad tool and have people be confused.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, look, and it's a great initiative, and obviously you can use it for, from what I've seen, you can use it for You can use it for various different types of projects. So obviously renovations, additions, new homes, duplexes, dual locks.
Yeah, that's right. So all of the residential CDC options are covered by our tool. So if you're building a dwelling house, knock down, rebuild in anywhere in the state, there's actually a few different codes, four different codes that could cover or normal house, depending on where you are. So our system knows that and knows which one applies. And then any of the more medium density options, the dual lock, the manor house, the terraces, those are also covered under the CDC pathway.
Yep.
On the DA side, interestingly, with the technology that we built and the way that it uses AI and interrogates the planning rules, we've actually set it up where you can pick any land use, any project type that's defined in the New South Wales system.
Wow.
So there's 195 of those.
Yep.
And you could go dial in, I want to build a wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah.
Tell me the rules for that on this property.
Yep.
So that's how powerful the system is.
Yeah. Great. So if someone's looking to a boarding house or a co-living or a like a multi-dwelling, some townhouses, they can access this software.
Yeah, or commercial stuff. So maybe you're building shops or a little takeaway food and drink premise, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You could go look that up with our tool, with our DA report.
Yeah, that's great. I'm a massive advocate for clients, or people, listeners. A lot of our listeners are investors, developers, or people doing projects to generate wealth, whether that be townhouses, dual locks, residential projects and developments. I'm massive on due diligence. People obviously having experts around them to do due diligence, but I think we are in an age now where it's important for the investor to also be educated around doing some of their own due diligence, because I think, the last thing you want to do is be going to a consultant for 20 or 30 different sites. Can you just walk through, let's just use, say, for example, a duplex as an example, because I think a lot of our listeners are doing residential projects, whether it be duplexes, dual locks, townhouses. Let's just use duplexes for example. So let's just say they're looking to do their own project. They're in the process of site acquisition. So they might be doing a combination of on-market, off-market, looking at on-market, off-market sites. How does that work? How does that work with PropCode? Can they what will this report show them, or what will this software pull up for them when they're looking at a site, so they know whether it's permissible, not permissible?
Yep. So if someone's doing a dual occupancy, there's always the potential that you could do it by CDC. A lot of people like doing CDC rather than DA because it's a much faster approval process. All the rules are black and white.
Yes.
If you've designed it, if your site is eligible and you've designed according to the CDC rules, then it's an approval within a couple of weeks from the certifier, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of the first question for anyone who's savvy with this development space is, can I do it by CDC?
Yep.
That's a complex question to answer, as it turns out.
Yes.
There's a bunch of environmental maps that you'd have to check to first make sure you're not in some sort of edge case around environmental constraints.
Yep.
Then, of course, the zone, you have to be in a residential zone. That's fairly straightforward to check. But then you'd have to go further and find out in the LEP, are there any special rules about dual occupancies that make it in the way of doing it by CDC?
Yep.
And so that could look, the key one there is a minimum lot size. So a lot of LEPs have a rule about the smallest, the minimum site area to be able to do a dual occupancy.
Yep.
And that is something that comes into the CDC rules.
Yes.
So that rule applies to DA, but also it applies to CDC, so equally.
Yep.
If there's no such rule, there's a minimum of 400 square meters.
Yep.
But you'd have to know to go look in the LEP to figure for the site to figure out whether that site is eligible.
Yes.
That's the kind of thing that PropCode checks for you instantly.
Yeah.
So we've got all those rules for dual lock and the other sites, sizes, typologies, multi-dwelling housing terrace. There are 400 rules like that across all the LEPs across New South Wales.
Yep.
So those are in the PropCode system.
Yep.
You'll see that right away flagged with our system if you look up an address on the CDC side. So there's that side. Maybe you can do a CDC and that's great. So you've sort of tested that CDC pathway. If that's a no, then you can flip over to the DA side and use the PropCode DA report and figure out, okay, I got to do DA. That's fine. What are the controls that would apply? Now you're talking about digging into a council DCP.
Yes.
those are a headache to navigate. So the LEPs, they're complex, but they're at least standardized.
Yeah.
All the LEPs in New South Wales are written the same way.
Yes.
The DCPs, however, no, they're not.
Yeah, that's it.
They are a headache.
Yep.
There's 128 different formats for DCPs in New South Wales. So now you have to go find in the DCP what are the setbacks for a dual occupancy. Maybe there is a minimum lot width. That's often a thing that a DCP will specify. Yeah. It can be other things like maximum 2 stories, even though if the height limit might allow you to squeeze in a third one, the DCP may say no, 2 stories max.
Yep.
So there's a lot of details like that you have to go find in the DCP now. So you have to navigate through potentially dozens of chapters in a DCP to figure out, which one applies to residential development or dual occupancy, or they'll have a big all-in-one residential chapter, and then you have to figure out is it this, subchapter 1, subchapter 2. So anyway, all of that, our AI does it. So we will go within a couple minutes. The AI says, okay, this site, dual occupancy, let me go look up all these rules and spit out really precise, clear answers to all those sorts of questions from the DCP.
Yeah, great. So it's almost giving you like a due diligence, but also almost like a compliance type report too. Would that be right?
Yeah. So there's a couple sort of themes there that you'll find out from these reports. And I can't say completely. You'll have to do some other checks, but you'll find out things like, is it bushfire prone land? Is there a heritage overlay? Is there acid sulfate soils that they may not be a big obstacle, but it's part of the feasibility consideration.
Yep.
You won't find out about flood, I have to say.
Yes.
That is a really complex one.
Yeah.
I know about flood from some of my earlier career where I was studying natural disasters and natural hazards risk. Sadly, in New South Wales, there's still not a centralized database or system for checking flood risk.
Yep.
It's just held by the councils, and they like to hold it tight.
Yep.
So you will unfortunately have to go check that flood risk with council directly.
Yep.
I would love to say that someday we'll have that data in our hands and consider that, but there are limits. So I can't promise that there's a full, we give you a green tick and you can buy the property. There's still buyer beware and do your own due diligence, but hopefully we'll accelerate your understanding of what the planning rules are for that site.
Yeah. No, I like that, and I think it's like anything, isn't it? Like at least it's one of the earliest stage flags, I believe, to see. Well, does this site go in the bin, or is it one that I can research and progress further?
Yep.
Obviously, I always say to people, like, we could give you 95% of the checks, but there's still some things, for example, on the contract of sale or in the planning certificate that needs to be looked at, or is there covenants on the site? Like things that obviously, that's your last sort of 5% of the checks.
Yes. And so maybe in that sense, PropCode helps you get from 50% to 95%.
Yeah.
So we're not saying you do 100%, but for a really low cost, you can find out the really critical things earlier on.
Yeah, which is good because I think it saves people running down a rabbit hole on a site that straight away you pull things up. Like I often, unfortunately, see where someone's gone on board a site that doesn't meet the minimum lot size, or they've just seen a duplex that was built next door 20, 30 years prior, so they've just assumed I can do it. And sadly, people do that. They'll see, there's three townhouses on this same street. They forget they were built 20 years ago.
Sure. Yeah.
The code, the DCP, the LEP could have changed twice over from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important, and I think we do live in a day, and I'm very big on this to any investor, developer, mum and dad doing projects, is to always spend some money on due diligence, because you can save tens and hundreds and thousands of dollars in headaches by buying the wrong site. So,
I mean, imagine there's a rule about minimum lot width buried in the DCP.
Exactly.
And did you take the time to read the DCP before you bought the site?
Yeah, that's it.
Who does that?
Yeah, that's it. And I think it's a great tool. And the thing I do like about PropCode is just an everyday investor with no planning knowledge can access this software. As you said, town planners even use it, architects use it, investors use it, developers use it, people in the industry use it. But it's a terrific tool for mums and dads who are looking to see, can I do a duplex on my site?
Even on, it can be little things like the lot width, for example. In CDC, the definition of lot width is actually kind of a perpendicular line at the building line, they say, so
Yeah.
along the front of the building.
Yep.
But a lot of people talk in the industry and in the space talk about frontage.
Yes.
So that's a different thing.
Yeah.
Different measurements.
Yeah.
So you can have lots where they're kind of angled from the street.
Yeah.
And the frontage is actually longer than the lot width
Yes.
for the CDC definitions.
Yes.
So even down to little things like that our software is understands that distinction and has the right measurement.
That's great.
Considers that correctly. So you might have if 15 meters is the minimum lot width on CDC. You might have a lot where it's angled and the frontage is 16 meters.
Yeah.
And maybe you know that. Maybe you've got it says that somewhere on the internet, or you measure on Google Maps and you think, cool, like I qualify, right? But maybe your lot width, because that angle is actually 14.5.
Yeah. So
and you can't do CDC.
Yep. Yep. So it can pick things like that up.
Yep.
That's really good. Yeah, and you hit a great point there, because that's a big one I see, where someone just saw on the deposited plan that the site was 15, forgetting that it's splayed inwards though.
Yeah.
And at the building line it might be 14 or 13 or
Yep.
that's great. And look, in terms of the report then, so if it's a DA, for example, so if you're doing a duplex DA, that'll spit out a report with the LEP and the DCP constraints in relation to the permissibility or
So it goes through a series of questions. So it's we've tried to structure this in a way that you get really deep answers, really sophisticated answers. So it's not kind of firstly, it's not a mapping tool. It's kind of an interesting thing that, we've taken this approach intentionally, that it's not sort of a shallow, and I say that not in a negative way, but just a tool where you'd be checking hundreds of sites and on a map or looking at map layers. It's not a visual tool.
Yeah.
It's a deep research tool.
Yep.
So the report format is what we've chosen as the way to deliver that value to people.
Yep.
So you would get, if you're getting a rapid planning report on PropCode and it's for the DA pathway and it's for a dual occupancy, there's, I think, 13 questions that it's running through and answering. So the AI is going and finding, or 14 for a dual lock actually, because it does subdivision. So it will say, is this permissible in the zone?
Yep.
Which, most of the time it will be if it's a residential zone, but sometimes not. Are there any special lot requirements? So the area, the width, those sorts of things.
Yep.
Can you do subdivision? And what's the minimum subdivision lot size? Sometimes you can't do subdivision. Sometimes it's prohibited. There are 3 LEPs in the Sydney area that prohibit subdivision for dual locks.
Yep.
So someone just yesterday was asking me about an address in Greenwich. That's Lane Cove, LGA.
Yep.
They don't allow subdivision of dual locks.
Yeah.
So again, another thing, would you read the LEP to find that clause before you make a purchase? Questionable.
Yeah.
Someone would have to tell you who knows to look for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then it will go on and say, what's the maximum height and floor space? What are the setbacks, landscaped area, site coverage, car parking requirements, all usually pulled out from the DCP.
Yep.
And then if there are any special rules around some of the physical constraints, so that would be acid sulfate soils, bushfire, heritage, flood. I say we don't have flood maps, but it does look up flood rules just so you can be aware of them.
Just to flag it.
Yeah, just to flag, not the flood status, but here are the rules that would apply if it was to a dual occupancy. If it was flood affected, here's what you'd have to consider. And then I think bushfire prone land, if I didn't say that, was the other one.
Yep.
So quite detailed, quite a lot there that, and in 5 minutes you'll have all those answers.
Yeah, that's great. And for someone who's a bit more inquisitive, they can then cross-check.
Yes.
They can then cross-check that report if they really want to against the LEP and the DCP.
Yes, indeed. So the PropCode platform includes all those documents with a viewer called PropCode Library.
Yes.
So you don't have to go to the council website to find the DCPs and download 30 PDF
so
files.
It gives you the actual codes.
So they're all so
drawn from.
Straight in the report, the rapid report. You can click on a link. It'll say this came from LEP Rule 4.1a. Click that link and it opens a new tab and shows you the LEP with that rule highlighted. Yep.
Yeah.
Or the DCP.
Yep. Yeah. So for people's own peace of mind, then they can
Yes.
literally cross-check each element.
Yes. So we know that's important, of course. We're talking about complex rules and documents. And I don't want it to be a black box, right? We don't want people thinking like, how did it get this answer?
Yep.
You can click and see exactly where it got the rule from.
Yeah. That's great. Is there Do you want to just share a little bit about your vision for the next? Is there anything? There might be some things you can't talk about, but is there anything you're excited about for 2025 in terms of PropCode and some of the things you're aiming to do and trying to do to further expand the software?
Yeah, so we've got lots of people using it now who are in, probably a lot of your listeners are people doing small developments. So it's the developer, or maybe I'll call it a hobbyist developer, in comparison to the Mervacs of the world, right?
Yes.
The property owner, investor, the small scale architect, the town planner. What we're hoping to do is put some form of our technology in the hands of councils.
Yes.
And of course, everyone's putting a lot of pressure on councils to do approvals faster. And so the people applying for DAs are putting pressure on council. The government, state government, is putting pressure on councils to go faster.
Yes.
And the reality is that councils, they have a lot to consider on DAs, but they also don't have a lot of staff.
Yeah.
The reality is that there's a shortage of planning staff
Yep.
in the country and in New South Wales.
Yep.
And so that's not something that can just be fixed overnight.
Yeah.
And what we can do with our technology is make their work a lot more efficient.
Yep.
So when they're doing these DA assessments, our technology could be helping them navigate their own rules, DCPs, LEPs, SEPs, where that applies. Sometimes a SEP will come in and we'll talk about the low mid-rise policy. That's a SEP that overrules the LEP and DCP. So then the council staff have to know about that.
Yep.
In every council, they have to know about this state level instrument.
Yep.
So with our technology, we think that assessment process could be a lot faster.
Yeah.
Not instant, and there's a lot of things that they'll still have to work out, but we can hopefully take away some of the grunt work, if you like, from that assessment officer in council, and they can just go straight to the actual kind of granular design things or engineering things that they need to sort out to do an approval.
Yep.
So that's probably the big thing.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's good. And look, let's jump across into the new low to mid rise stage 2 reforms that just got announced 28th of Feb.
Yep.
We're all hoping it was going to be November last year.
Yes, it took a while.
That came and went. But the exciting thing is it is here. And I know you've been very active in that space, especially through your platform, through LinkedIn. You've shared some really good insights, and that's why I thought it'd be great to get you on, because this whole month we're going to be talking on the podcast around the reforms, how it's going to impact the industry in New South Wales in those well located areas. But look, first and foremost, you just want to talk about the reforms in terms of what that means for PropCode, and then we might just dive a little bit into it in a few directions and in regards to your knowledge and your experience and some of the findings and the mapping of what's happening in PropCode and how you're going to be really be able to help the industry navigate this new reform the state government's brought out.
Sure. So it's a really big new policy that they've brought out. This is, of course, something the government has been talking about for well over a year now as a initiative they wanted to bring in. And we in the industry, as you say, we've been waiting for it ever since then. So they first announced it, I think, November 2023. So we're coming up on 15 months that it took to get to implementation. And it is, I haven't been a planner for 50 years or whatever in New South Wales, but I think it's the biggest wholesale rezoning that has occurred in New South Wales since the start of the EPA Act in 1979.
I'd probably agree.
And so that's a big deal for our industry and for the urban landscape in Sydney and other parts of New South Wales where the policy has effect. And so, what will happen from here in terms of the real world, in terms of stuff getting built, is a really big question. And, there will be people listening to this who are going to make some of those new dwellings happen.
Yep.
If you're in the right place and if it stacks up with feasibility. So what is the policy? It is adding new density for residential buildings within 10 minutes walking distance of a long list of stations and centers scattered all around Sydney and Newcastle, Central Coast, Wollongong, Illawarra, Shoalhaven.
Yep.
So that could really fundamentally change a lot of landscapes, a lot of places around the greater metropolitan area of New South Wales. So within an 800-meter walking distance, and this is a really key thing in how they've defined it, You'd have to measure walking distance. So within 800 meters, walking distance of the edge of a center zone or a station entrance.
Yes.
Particular stations, there's 60 stations on the list, and particular centers. There's, I guess it'd be 111 centers on the list.
Yep.
And on a map. And it covers a lot of city, but not everywhere. So you'll have to check precisely. Yeah. But
isn't that? I'll just jump in for a second. Isn't it interesting? I've had a lot of phone calls and spoken to a lot of guys who are disappointed because originally they thought it was going to be within those like Sydney, Newcastle, Illawarra, Shoalhaven. A lot of people thought it was going to be within all the train stations, for example.
Right.
And there's quite a few disappointed people.
Yes. So they did a bit of put out a policy and see what people say about it.
Yes.
Initially. I'm not sure what they thought the reaction was going to be, but depending on who you ask, there was quite a bit of uproar among certain places and communities and councils.
Yeah.
And probably fair enough. I remember looking at the original policy and thinking, there's a town in the Hunter Valley called Brankston that has like 3 train services a day.
Yeah.
And it was going to get 6-story apartment buildings.
Yeah.
And you go like, why?
Yeah. That's
so should they have filtered? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they should have.
Yeah.
Some of the decisions they made around which stations and centers to include were a bit funny to me.
Yeah. Yep.
One example in an area I'm familiar with is they chose Rose Bay Center, which is facing the harbor and a bit of a small center with a few shops. They didn't choose Bondi Beach, which is considerably bigger and denser and has 3 supermarkets. And so and you could find a number of other cases like this station, but not the neighboring station. So why? Hard to know.
Yep.
I'm not even necessarily criticizing, but it is what it is.
It makes you wonder what politics happen behind the scenes, I guess.
Potentially.
With some of the decisions.
Yeah, potentially. And there's another thing that came out through some mapping I did, which was that they chose quite a few inner west stations and centers in inner west Sydney. And then they've gone and said in the rules, aircraft noise areas are excluded. So ANEF contour of 20 or greater, which wiped out nearly all of the inner west.
Yeah.
So they've chosen stations, which then got completely excluded because they're under the flight path of Sydney Airport. So, some questions like that, I suppose.
Even some of the flood areas I found were interesting, like Newcastle, for example. Some areas in Newcastle,
like Hamilton, probably.
The land's flood affected.
Yes.
So but they've mapped it. So
yes. So some questions there. You'll potentially say, "Oh, great! I'm in a station. I'm within 300 meters distance, so easy." But then, actually, it turns out that you're, under a flight path, and so you can't. You don't get the benefit of the rules.
It's a no-go.
So anyway, aside from that, I worked out there's about 220,000 properties in New South Wales that potentially are within that walking distance. And then about 20% of those get excluded by some exclusions they've written in, including the aircraft noise and a handful of other environmental ones like bushfire prone land. So that actually picks up some properties on like the North Shore of Sydney, for example, around the valleys there where the bush comes in. But there's still a lot of opportunity. Still potentially around, I think it's 130,000 properties that can get some new benefit from the policy.
Yep. So 130,000 that it will be at a bare minimum dual occupancy potential.
Yeah. So right. So the new permissibility is in a residential zone in these walking catchments. You can do anything from dual occupancy to terraces, multi-dwelling housing, up to apartment buildings.
Yep.
Now, key with the apartment buildings is limit of 2 stories if it's an R1 and R2 zone.
Yep.
If it's an R3 and R4 zone, then they can go up to the 4 or 6-story limits.
Yes, depending on whether it's 400 or 800.
Yeah, that's right. So there's an inner catchment, 400-meter walking distance that gets a 6-story limit on apartments, and then the outer catchment out to 800-meter walking distance is 4 stories.
Great. And look, I think one thing I'm really excited about is that at PropCode, you guys are on the front foot with this.
Trying to be,
with this introduction. Obviously, it's only recently come in, but can you just tell us a little bit about what you're doing at PropCode to help investors, developers, or planners, architects, building designers, what you've done or what you're in the process of implementing to help people navigate this new opportunity? But like you said, there's potentially 120,000 properties in these well-located areas that could have some development potential.
Yep.
What are you guys doing, and what's in the pipeline, and what's currently available for people to use to identify these sites?
Yep. So from the day that they announced this back in February 21st, it would have been, and then a week later implemented. I've been busy hacking away on our database and implementing the rules and working out, what's, and to be honest, there's a lot of complex logic in saying, okay, I got a property. These are the planning controls today. What do the rules say, and how does that work out to the new planning controls for this site? Calculating walking distance. So at PropCode, we've run that calculation on every one of the stations and centers.
Yep.
So 800 meter and 400 meter walking distances.
Yep.
And to be clear, that's not, official legal. Like, you'll still have to measure yourself on a DA, but hopefully a good guide from us.
Yep.
And what we've got to is, so I've been putting out numbers. These numbers of properties are affected. That's stuff that we were able to work out as PropCode. That wasn't part of the announcement from the government. So that shows what we can do with our database, where we've got every property in New South Wales. We know what the planning controls are today.
Yep.
And then I can put in these rules as additional logic and work out, here's what the new controls will be. And it passes all the criteria for the low mid-rise policy. It's not in one of the exclusions. It's got this existing permissibility, and therefore it gets this new permissibility. It's got this existing FSR or height control, and that's less than the new FSR, so therefore there's an uplift from the policy. So we've been able to work all that out, and as a generous gift to the community, we've created a tool that anyone can look up their address, or any address, any property, to see what the impacts are of the reforms.
Yep.
So you don't even have to pay us to get that detail.
Yep.
Just come to our website and you'll be able to punch in an address, title ID, and within 5 seconds you'll get an email with our details, our analysis.
Excellent. Yeah, well, what we'll do to help people, and also to get people to put PropCode in front of people, we'll make sure that link's in the show notes too, so that people can jump onto your site to access that link. That's terrific. And so I guess that's terrific that you guys are in on the front foot in that space. So in terms of a report, then will it be very similar then? People will be able to go in and purchase a report?
So we've got our existing, we talked about this just now, the CDC and the DA reports.
Yep.
And those, of course, deal with a lot of details in the analysis of what you can do with CDC or what you can do with DA.
Yes.
And so the new low and mid-rise rules, to the extent that they affect particular sites and particular questions around that planning report, that will show up in those sections.
Yep.
One example is on the CDC side. The new rules, in a lot of cases, are not intended to change the CDC eligibility or rules or outcomes or pathway. So they've excluded some things so that they don't change the CDC rules, so that you can only take advantage of the new LMR rules with DAs.
Yep.
But there are a couple of cases where that does change. So an example is in R2 zones in these low mid-rise areas. Multi-dwelling housing is now always permissible.
Yes.
So some councils didn't permit it in their R2 zones.
Yep.
But now that's overridden by the new policy. So that means now you can possibly have a CDC pathway that you didn't have before.
Yep.
To do terraces or manor house.
Yes.
So that maybe you were limited to dual occupancy on a site in the CDC pathway, or it was fully prohibited to even do multi-dwelling housing.
Yep.
But now you could do a terrace project or a manor house with CDC.
Yep.
Thanks to the LMR permissibility.
Yep. And that's to do with the lot size.
So you'd still have to follow all the CDC rules, like lot size. So if the only thing that was preventing it was prohibited in the zone, that's now not a problem anymore.
Yeah. Yep. So obviously under the new policy, terraces is 18 metres. Obviously CDC is 21, so you'd still need to meet your 21.
So the LMR minimum lot widths don't change the CDC lot width rules.
Yeah.
So whatever that was previously for CDC is still the case.
Same. Yeah.
So for example, it's 15 meters for manor houses.
Yeah.
That still stands even if the LMR rule is different for DA.
And 21 for terraces.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I know you and I had a chat earlier about this, but there is talk of some potential updates to the low rise diversity housing code for CDC they're saying July 1, 2025.
So part of the and you referred to this as stage 2 earlier, part of the low mid-rise policy that came out initially was stage 1.
Yeah.
That was back in July 2024.
Yep.
That the only thing that did was add dual occupancy permissibility in most of the R2 zones across the state.
Yep.
So there were actually really only 13 councils that didn't
have it anyway.
That didn't have it anyway.
Yeah.
So that changed in July 1st.
Yep.
Only the permissibility, no other rules.
Yep.
However, they said at the time, and this is written in the rules, that can't be used to do CVC.
Yes.
So even in, I think Hornsby is one example.
Yep.
You still can't do a CDC dual occ in Hornsby in an R2 zone. You could do it by DA today, but not CDC.
Yeah.
So that is still a restriction that remains until July 1st of 2025.
Yes.
And the reason is the department wants to give the councils time to create a minimum lot area rule when they didn't need one before.
Yes.
So I just saw, for instance, Current Guy Council has exhibited one. They're proposing 1,015 square meters as their minimum lot area. So that's a different urban fabric there than most places. So that's the intent there. And as far as I know, that date isn't changing. So July 1st, 2025 is still when you could start doing CDCs with that dual lock permissibility.
Yep. And
but as I just said, the new multi-dwelling housing permissibility that's just been finalized on 28th Feb, that isn't delayed at all in any way for CDC.
Yeah.
So hence why I just said you can now do those.
You can now
CDC.
do terraces.
By CDC.
Which is an exciting opportunity.
Yeah,
because there are a lot of councils that have not allowed multi-dwelling in R2 zoned areas, especially. So, it's like anything, isn't it? Like often it's the early adopters, I say, that do well because the market. A lot of the market doesn't understand yet what can and can't be done.
Right, especially on the acquisition, if you can still pay the former market price before development potential has kind of worked its way into those pricings.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. So maybe we don't want too many real estate agents listening to the episode.
Forget that you heard me.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's great. And look, in terms of your software, so PropCode you were saying there's obviously a good diverse range of people that are using the software now.
Yeah.
How does it work? Is there like someone might be looking at this just for a one-off to look to buy a property to put their dream house on, so they want to do a check. But there could be people that want to use this every day, or some that might use it a couple of times a month.
Right.
Do you have different options to suit the different type of needs? Like a town planner is obviously going to have very different needs to a one-off. Mum or dad that wants to buy a site to do an investment or a project.
Yeah, that's right.
So
and a lot of these sorts of tools have been subscription based up until now, and we not only did we believe this anyway, but lots of our early users that we talked to for feedback said they wouldn't do a subscription. People don't like subscriptions kind of piling up if they're in the business. Or if you own one property or two properties or whatever, you're not wanting to subscribe to something, of course. So we sell all our products as one-off purchases if you want. So you can pay $40 for a CDC report, $50 for a DA report, $70 to get both of them as a bundle.
Yep.
And that's all, like, there's no subscription. You're not committed to keep paying us something that you're not using.
Yep.
If you do have higher volume, we've got subscription options. So you can pay $80 a month for 8 CDC reports. You can pay $120 a month for 8 DA reports.
Yep.
Or $160 for the 2 of them. So if you need 8 combined reports in a month, then that's a higher volume option.
Yeah. Which is perfect for, say, a bigger builder developer or a builder, or even like a town planner or someone that is doing this regularly.
Yeah. And we've got a lot of another bonus with the CDC subscription is we'll actually show you on any address, if you've got a subscription, we'll show you on any address what the headline CDC eligibility outcomes are without the full detailed report.
Yep.
So you can actually just check any number of addresses to get the quick green light, essentially.
Yep. So if it gets the I think it's a green tick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not the red. You don't want to see the red.
Yeah.
So if you get the green, then you know, okay, well, it's worth spending, like you said.
Yeah, then you can use one of
the 40 or the 70 if you want to look at both.
Yeah, well, you'd have a subscription, so you just use one of your 8 for the month to get that report.
Yep.
For records.
Yep. I think that's terrific, because I think even just for an investor looking to buy a site, like, I always tell people to factor in some contingency money or some, due diligence money. Like, what's $40 in when you might be paying $500, $600, $1 million, $1.5, $2 million for a development site? It's for me, it's you're crazy not to.
Yeah, and as I said, the whole point of our vision is it was just hard to do this before, right?
Yeah.
There just weren't ways that you could easily dial in and get these answers in a kind of online, digital, instant way.
Yep.
So yeah, what's the alternative is you go read the LEPs, DCPs yourself, or you might have to call a town planner, who's probably going to charge for their time. Or yeah, you're taking the risk and you don't know what you don't know potentially.
Yeah, that's good. Excellent. Was there anything else you wanted to share with the audience? I guess what's one of the big just one key thought as we jump into 2025 in this landscape.
Yeah, one key thought is there's been a lot of talk with the housing crisis and housing supply and what the current New South Wales government's doing around planning reforms. There's been a lot of talk kind of brewing up in this of should we start over with the planning system, and is the planning system too much of an impediment to supply and development and people being able to build to those opportunities and to the demand that's out there. I would be somewhat supportive of that. I think that from what I've seen in the planning system, it's just incredibly complex. It's a system that was first written in 1979 and has had so many Band-Aids put on it. They actually 10 years ago had to renumber the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act because they had done so many like 79A, 79AA, 79AJ. So they kept sticking in new rules. And then of course the council LEPs, DCPs are potentially thousands of pages long in some cases. I think I found one that was 3,000 plus pages long. So is there a little too much there to navigate? I would think so. As much as the complexity gives us an opportunity, if I'm being honest, and the change would give us an opportunity to help people understand, I think it's the best thing for the industry and for the way that property development happens and housing supply happens. That we find a better way to do this. South Australia is a good example. They just redid theirs really just a few years ago. So they've got a lot more statewide consistency in how the rules work, how the zones work, which controls might possibly apply for a particular project. It's still localized in that they draw their own, zoning in each place. So it's not the state government forcing that every place has to look the same. So there's a local control, but just the way the framework and the rules are written, there's that consistency that gives everyone the assurance that they're not missing something, they're not misunderstanding something. It's just easy to navigate, and I think that we could benefit from the same in New South Wales.
I agree. No, I think you hit a great point there, and let's hope in our lifetime, or in our professional lifetime at least, that there will be some consistency. But look, one thing I do love and I really admire about what you guys are doing is you're getting a complex system and trying to bring some consistency, or at least bringing some simplicity, and getting a lot of the complexity of our very complex New South Wales planning system. And you're actually putting it into the hands of people to take the complexity out, which I think is brilliant. And I just think that's just using tech, isn't it, at its best value. So look, I hope that council do come on board with you. I think it'll be terrific. Because I think if we can take the complexity out of a lot of this system, even if it is a long-term process of changing a lot of our planning systems, I think what you've done is brilliant.
Thanks.
And I think if you're coming on next time, I'd love to. I think next time we get you on, it'd be great to actually share the software and do a screen share, and we can actually navigate, because I just think this is such a good tool for people doing developments and investments and really doing their own due diligence before taking that next step of maybe talking to consultants and that side of it. So it's been really good to have you on.
Yeah, great. And you said yourself, you've had clients coming and bringing the PropCode report.
Oh, it's great.
And that you find that good that they've already done that step, and you're having to help them figure out, hey, you actually can't do it here.
Exactly. Yeah, there's nothing worse than looking at 10 or 20 sites that just don't work. So if at least give someone the confidence to go that next step further. So look, what's the best way for people to reach out to PropCode?
So come to our website, propcode.com.au. Or you can follow myself, Will Sullivan, or the PropCode page on LinkedIn. And if you want to send us a question, you certainly can. There's a contact form on the website. And as I said, this low mid-rise reform, you'll see a link right on the homepage to look up an address to see what the details are for that.
Brilliant. And we'll make sure we share all those details you've just mentioned in the show notes, as well as that link to look up the address. So it's been great to have you on, Will.
Great. Thanks, Nathan.
And look, thank you all for listening in. I hope you've got a lot out of this session. It's been hugely insightful. Make sure you do reach out to Will and the team at PropCode. It's a really innovative tool for anyone in this space. I think it's important to have the best tools, the best of the best tools at your disposal when you are doing projects and developments and looking into that space. So look, if you enjoyed this session, I want to encourage you to share it, like, subscribe, share it with friends, family, colleagues, people in the industry, people that you know are passionate about development. So thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next week.